Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we tackle a single relevant question based on our Bible reading for that day. This week our reading is centered around the book of Revelation. Today I'm joined by Cheryl Doughty and Alyssa Bream. Our reading was 12, 13, and 14. We're going to look at the first part of 14, where it says, "Then I saw the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of a mighty ocean waves, or the rolling of loud thunder. It was like the sound of many harpists playing together. This great choir sang a wonderful song in front of the throne of God and before the four living beings and the 24 elders. No one could learn this song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. They have kept themselves as pure as virgins, following the Lamb wherever he goes. They have been purchased from among the people on the earth as a special offering to God and to the Lamb. They have told no lies. They are without blame." Now, I made some reference to my struggles with Revelation over the years, and most of it is because of some of the craziness I've heard preached from this book. This particular concept of the 144,000, I think I have heard more random theories about who they are, how they get there, than pretty much any of the rest of the book. Because we talked about yesterday that two prophets, for years, I only heard Enoch and Elijah. Later, as I began to study, it seemed to more represent Moses and Elijah to me. But this, we have an entire sect of a religion. Some people would call it a cult, who believe that they are the 144,000, only.
But not even all of them believe that they are part of that.
That's right. Yeah.
They have to have a special revelation to be part of that
Right.
144,000.
That's right. So who are the 144,000 and what do they represent? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to talk about today. We're going to dive deep into, I think your word is conspiracy theories.
Willis's word.
Yeah.
That was off air, Steve.
I'm sorry. Well, it is. I don't want to. Conspiracy theory is, you said, as a joke, but I do think people use passages like this to manipulate people, and if that qualifies as conspiracy, then so be it. But I do think there's a lot of manipulation that goes on sometimes with passages like this.
I did read that I guess it would have been ancient Greek word for number actually more frequently referred to an uncountable multitude of people than it did a specific number. And then to attach a number that large to that makes me believe that it means like an uncountable number of people, an incredibly large number of people. Because, let's face it, if only 100, if we're taking this literally, and, something like the people who would manipulate you into thinking this is the literal number, that's not very many people in that way. If you think about it as the literal number, then, over 2,000 years, chances are like that got piled up a long time ago.
Well, I've always said, if there's only 144,000, I'm not telling anybody because I'm going to keep my odds up. I'm not
Right.
witnessing to anybody. I don't want to be a preacher. I don't want to give an altar call. Like, I want to keep
And
my
I'm pretty
odds.
sure I'm not going to make it.
But I don't think that's what it's talking about.
But
here.
here's the
No, I
thing.
don't either.
We like to take the parts literally that we want and then not, because it's 144,000 Jewish male virgins. And so, like, we want to take the 144,000 literally, but then all that rest of the stuff is just, we can take that figuratively. And so, and I think because we didn't read it, this go through of Revelation, if the first time we hear about this 144,000 is actually in Revelation 7, and there it lists out the tribes and also a list of way the tribes have never been listed before, which is kind of interesting. It talks about which would be a half tribe, usually the Manasseh, and then Joseph is a tribe, which is just kind of not the way the list has been before, which is interesting. But
did you read, what's the term that they use to describe them there
what do you mean?
in Revelation 7? They describe them as the servants of the living God.
Okay.
No, I'm saying you're referring back to that, and that is the way that they describe those 144,000 there as the servants of the living God.
Right. And so it's 12,000 from each tribe. So I think you get this number a few ways. 12 is like a holy number. There was 12 tribes, 12 disciples, all of that. 12 times 12 is 144. And then they would add on like zeros to be like,
This goes on and on.
there's a lot of them. And so I think you're right where it's like, it's a multitude, it's uncountable, but they're really, really holy people. And that's kind of where that 144.
So what is their purpose? You said they're Jewish male virgins.
Well, that's what the text would literally say.
I do think they're Jewish people. I don't have any. I do think that it symbolizes some Jewish people. I don't think this is, at least the way I would grasp it, that it is the multitude of those who are saved, the multitude of those who are going to spend eternity with Him. And I think it's specifically speaking to about the Jewish people. I don't think this is an all-inclusive multitude here that you're talking about. That's the way I read it. I think it directly names the Jewish people and the 12 tribes, whether it's chapter 7 or chapter 14.
So you think it's talking about the remnants of His people that
Yes.
are actually left in a geographical area?
Yeah, well, I don't know about a geographical area. This is where it becomes dicey for me, because this is way outside of my comfort zone to talk about. I'm not a tribulation, rapture, antichrist. I know a guy, and if he opens his mouth, this is the kind of stuff he's going to talk about. And my eyes just glaze over in reality. He might be right. I'll give you an example. I was in an event he was at, I don't know, about 4 months ago, and he came by where I was, shook my hand. I said, "How you doing?" He said, "I'm doing good." I asked him, because he's older than I am, "Have you retired yet?" He said, "No." He said, "I can't retire." He said, "I thought about it." He said, "But I believed the coming of the Lord, and I knew I was done then. Like, I knew I was getting ready to get the sermon, because that's all he talks about is the coming of the Lord." And maybe that's what God has gifted him here and placed him here for, and I just have to accept that. But he started telling me about the red heifer, and there are 2 red heifers alive now in Israel, and he just goes on with all of these details. So he loves this kind of stuff. But it appears to me, if there is this concept of tribulation, antichrist, persecution, judgment, the 2 prophets rising up, if all of that has some literalization to it, and these witnesses, they're witnesses, these 144,000 are a part of it seems to me that they have lived pure, holy lives in opposition to what this Antichrist was trying to impose on the world, and have been faithful to God, almost in a fulfillment of the law, that their coming to Christ is, or that's the way I guess I would have to say it, was they overcame the persecution of the Antichrist and were purified through suffering. You talked about that sometime this week. when I read that, that's kind of the gist I get. I'm not. I think there is so much. Is the word illusory? There's so many illusions in this. That so much imagery, that it is hard. The danger, you started touching on this. The danger of Revelation is that we're literal, illiteral in how we read it. Okay, one verse we're reading, this is literal, lake of fire, brimstone, fire out of their mouth, seas in the, rivers in the blood. And then, and then the things we don't understand are
The grasshoppers are helicopters.
yeah, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do with, and so that's a challenge because I'm a very literal person, and that's one of the reasons why this book is so challenging to me because it is. I'm a very literal person, and when I see it, okay, how do I apply this? And I think you just kind of have to tread lightly through the book of Revelation. And I would say distrust highly anybody that says they understand it completely. That's what I would say. Distrust highly anybody that says they understand it completely. If you know what, does that make sense? That I don't think it's possible to understand it completely. And so I think the way I read it, if you ask me what I thought it meant, I think it's people who lived pure and holy lives during the tribulation in opposition to what was being imposed on them by what we would call the Antichrist and are presented as holy. And they have, there's a song that it uses the words, but it gives me this clear picture. The song, God, what's the name of the song? Now, but the words go, these are they who have come out of great tribulation. They've washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. They're singing this song. That's the way the song goes. And that's what it says here, that these 144,000, if it's a literal number, they're the only ones that can sing this particular song because they have come through something that everybody else hasn't come through. They faced something that everybody else hasn't faced. And and I only say this in the context that I lean more toward a catching away of the saints for a period of time, whatever word you want to put on it. And there is some distinct troubled period here on the earth, but I believe there are people who are redeemed during that period of time. And that's kind of the take I would fall under, is these are people who are redeemed after the saints have been taken away. Because is that a question y'all ever ask? Can you be saved after the rapture? Has anybody ever asked that question?
I mean, I have wondered it when I
Yeah.
read the book of Revelation.
Right. Was that a
it
question?
says that they have been purchased from the earth as a special
Right.
offering to God. It really makes you wonder.
And I know you have a different take at this point in your life on that
Right.
concept of rapture, but
I mean, that was something that would have been discussed, and I think what I would have grown up with, it was really, really hard to
Mhm.
to not fall during the tribulation period, but it was possible.
Mhm.
I don't know. I have a picture in my head right now of some movie about Revelation, and it wasn't The Left Behind, but of a guillotine scene of
Mhm.
somebody who wouldn't take the 666 on their forehead, and they got, so like, I don't know.
Since you brought that up,
Uh-oh.
because that's in some of these passages
Right.
we
Yeah.
read. How do you feel about that? Is it
How do I feel
literal?
about
Is it a
666?
literal thing?
I think you know me well enough by now that I read Revelation in, like, it's about God's ultimate reign. It's about the perseverance of the saints, and I'm not gonna fall on that microchips are the mark of the beast and getting like I'm not gonna to go down that path, and that's just not something that I have found to be helpful in understanding Christianity or anything like that.
I think it makes it pretty obvious to us that it's going to be nearly impossible during that time for you not to take the mark of the beast and survive, because of the way that they make it obvious that this is going to be what you have to do to live, or that's how most people are going to feel about it, that you have to take it in order to, what did they say, like commerce and, food. It sounds like for you to be able to just day-to-day life, to get the things you need, that you're going to have to agree to take it. But you might not completely understand what you're doing.
During COVID, like, it became a real conversation with people. It did. Mm-hmm. I had conversations with people who were like, I'm not taking the vaccine because they're putting a microchip in you and it's the mark of the beast. And my argument to every single one of them, and by the way, I have my phone here, what I read in Scripture, this comes as close to what I see it describing in Scripture as the ability to do commerce, the ability to track where you go, what you do, your habits, your thinking. This device knows more about you than you know about yourself.
Than you might admit about yourself.
That's exactly right. So if you're worried about them inserting a microchip, I don't think it's if that is the concept, I don't believe that's how it goes about. I don't believe that's how it goes down. I don't believe it's I'm going to take it or I'm not going to take it. I think it's much more subtle, much the way this phone is subtle. This phone has taken over our lives in ways that nothing else could. It dictates to us what we see, how we think, who we're connected with, all of those things. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it listens.
Oh, it does. Yeah.
It's 100% chance it's listening to
when you have a conversation about something and haven't Googled it, and then you see an ad on Facebook for it, exactly it, you're like, Facebook.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. We can read this about taking a number of 666 and we can apply it that, like, the way you have to have a phone in today's society, but like, how do we not let that rule our lives? And I think that there's a lot we can do with the lessons from Revelation here today without having to go down this futuristic path of trying to understand exactly what's going to happen in the future, because
trying to predict,
we never are going to be able to predict what's going on.
No.
And I agree with what you're saying, because that is a really great example of, I'm not saying that is it, but it is a great example of something that now we find completely impossible to live without.
Oh my gosh.
That was not necessary. And
now we all have iPhones basically strapped to our
into,
we all three have Apple Watches.
Like, what have we actually fallen into?
You think
what
about,
have we agreed to?
You think about leaving home and not having that device with you.
Oh, that gives me.
Yeah, see, exactly. People just have a nervous breakdown. Oh my God, how am I going to survive?
You don't think it feels like freedom?
Huh?
When you accidentally leave home without it?
See,
but my teenage daughter, she's going to turn right around and come.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. We have our youngest son.
No, you've told this.
I didn't tell it on the podcast.
You did.
No, I didn't. I told it between podcasts. So I'm going to tell it on the podcast. I told it in this room, but not.
Oh, I thought you told it between and you told it on the podcast.
In the middle of 4 o'clock in the morning, he shows up at our house, and I can hear him down the hall because he doesn't live with us. Mom. I said, Barbara.
He's lucky he didn't get shot over.
He's lucky the dog didn't eat him alive.
Yeah, I mean,
say, yes, Lord, you're serving eaters.
And what had happened was his phone would not charge and was dead. And he was not going to have it for today. He was actually going to be gone that day with Daniel's daddy. And he did not know how he was going to function. He is not alone.
Missing a limb.
Huh?
Missing a limb.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
becomes an appendage to our body. He did not know how he was going to function that day. He was having a complete moment of panic. The generations, particularly that are behind us, and so he's probably a young millennial or an old Z. I don't know which one. He's 29. But by the time this Z and Alpha, you know, I was the book we just did as a staff. One of the things he says in the back is the phone and the tablet is a new pacifier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you used to give a kid a pacifier to keep them from crying. Now you give them a device, and we become so dependent on it that our lives, instead of this being a tool, our lives revolve around, you know, where this is at, what it tells us, from maps to, you know, all of those things. And somebody asked me the other day, they were telling me, they were saying how thankful they were for the Every Moment Holy references that I had made. And they said, you know, there's an app you can download and you get a new liturgy every day. You could use it to pray. And I said, I can't. I said, if I open my phone during my Bible reading and prayer time, it's like it's a giant sucking sound. And I'm checking my email. Oh, look, somebody texts me.
Well, that's also what I was going to say about it, is that we're even more than dependent. We willingly give ourselves to
Our
it when
lives.
we have nothing else to do. That's what my daughter said, because she gave up social media, different facets of social media over the 21 days of prayer and fasting. And she said, when it was over, she said to me, I feel like I don't want to go back to those things. And I said, okay, well, why? And she said, I just started to realize what a horrible habit I had made it, because it was always in arm's reach. And she said I'd have 1 second that my mind was not occupied with something and I'm picking it up just to fill my mind, you know.
Yeah.
And it really makes you start to think about how much of your actual self and time and attention you're willingly given to this device that is going to give you information. And it, you know, we've talked about this before, as time goes on, especially with a lot of those social media facets, I guess, it is convincing you of the world that you want to be convinced of. It's going to be
That's right.
all of the things that it
Confirmation
knows
bias.
you're looking for.
You see things that are going to confirm what you already
So I guess the question is, how do we navigate this? How do we navigate being in this world but not part of it? I mean, I can tell you, for instance, when I started working on staff, and you know, we have the Slack channel that we all are back and forth talking to each other, and this was quite a few years ago. I was like, oh no, they expect me to have this thing on me all the time, because at the time it was not unusual for me to leave the house without it, or if I was going outside to do something, I'd go hours without ever
That's why you
looking at
quit
it.
the first time.
Or what?
That's why you quit the first time.
Right? I know.
They want to be able to talk to me 24 hours a day.
666. I know.
Oh, so we give you 1 day off.
No, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I mean,
no, I get it.
And that was several years ago. Now I don't think twice about the fact that I'm just expected to have it on me all the time. But I mean, it's a practical question. Like, how do you know? How do we navigate that? How do we suggest other people?
Yeah, you know, that has been the dilemma, I think, of the church all along for 2,000 years.
Right.
You know, how are you in the world but not of the world? You know, is that the right way to say that?
Yeah.
How do you survive in a world without being worldly? You know, and I think a couple of things I would say is there has to be constant resets, where you have moments where you've fasted, you know, for example. During the fast, somewhere I'm going to figure out how to preach this, because I read it. A friend of mine wrote it, and I'll give credit to him. But in those moments of reset where we we create this resistance. I'm not doing this for the sake of my spiritual relationship. And in the case of your daughter, I don't know if I want to go back to this, or how do I go back to this without it consuming me?
Mhm.
My friend wrote this about, he said, sin came into the world solely because man was unwilling to fast one single thing. That God called a singular fast. Don't eat of this tree. Just one thing.
Yeah.
And when they did, it opened up all of these other things. And that's what I was saying about opening my phone to pray. If I go for that one thing, it opens up so many other things. As I'm trying to get to the app, I see that I've gotten a text or a message or an email, and I need to return it, or I think I need to return it. And I think there has to be intentional moments of fasting. I think that we've done fasting a lot of years. I think the last 2 years have been much more intentional, and this one with the 21 days of prayer were much more intentional. I think those moments create opportunities for us to hit a reset button to say, I didn't need that, or I shouldn't be doing that, or I shouldn't be listening to that. So you guys talked about fasting podcast. I didn't fast podcasts, but I have eliminated a lot of podcasts that I listened to that were not, it wasn't that they were unhealthy spiritually. Many of them were discussing science, or one in particular is a neuroscientist who I was fascinated by some of the things he talked about. But I realized that it wasn't spiritually benefiting my life. It was not a bad thing, but it was.
Yeah, that's how
it was an input that wasn't being healthy. And so I'm trying to weed more and more of those things out. And I think the intentional resets, fasting is a reset. It's an opportunity for you to reset. I'm on my second time through a book right now that I'm listening to, and it's more of a coaching book. But one of the things it talks about is rest or restoration or resets, that how it is only in those moments of nothing that you can realize that you don't need the somethings that you had filled your life with, that were consuming you. And so what I would say is, I think there has to be moments of reset, so that so we can be of the world, we can be in the world, but not of the world. We can be here, but not be worldly. Worldly was the word I heard most. Don't be worldly. And usually it was around makeup or jewelry or something, that you look worldly, but I don't think that's what it means. I think when the world influences our life and our lifestyle and the things that we do more than the things of God do, we're worldly. Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. Tomorrow we'll be back with a special edition with Pastor Jay and myself as we finish up the book of Revelation before we transition into a new season of the podcast. We thank you for being with us. We hope you'll be back tomorrow as we finish up Revelation.